Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela. My name is Fran and I am one of the co-hosts for this podcast. You guys, Angela and I have the privilege to sit down and have a conversation with our friend and author, Mary Marantz. Mary has a new book coming out called Underestimated, and you guys, you are going to want to get it. This is what Mary has to say. Hard story people are my kind of people. Here's to the kind ones, the quiet ones, the ones so often overlooked. For all those who have ever felt underestimated, first by the world, but even worse by yourself. These words are both a love letter to you and a field guide as we fight our way forward together. We are so thankful for Mary. We're so thankful for this book. And we're thankful for this conversation today. Sit back and enjoy the show, you guys. All right, everybody. Another incredible episode, if I say so myself, Angela. We haven't even begun the conversation with our guest today, but I am so excited and I'm so thankful that we have a new friend. And I do believe that when this is all said and done, we will call ourselves friends. Mary Marantz is on the show today. Angela, I'm so excited. And I know that you are especially excited because of just some similar connections that you all connected over immediately on social media. Angela, tell us why you're thrilled that Mary's here as we introduce her and kick off this conversation.
Well, there are so many reasons, but they include the fact that Mary is an attorney. She has just an incredible new book out that talks about our mindset and our mind shift and some of the things that, Fran, we've been talking about the last few weeks on the podcast. And I think I shared this with you, Mary, but I too lived in a single wide trailer during my law school years.
Oh, yeah,
We lived in a 20-year-old country blue and peach single wide that left a lot to be desired, but it got us through. I lived in the city my whole life, and then we moved to a farm. So anyway, when I saw that and saw attorney and saw words like people pleasing, imposter syndrome, overthinking, and more in this new book, I thought, okay, this author and this book have got to be part of this conversation. So Mary, thank you for being with us today.
Oh my gosh, Fran and Angela, I feel like we've been going, talking in DMs about this episode for so long, and the day is finally here. And I'm just so excited to get to sit down with you all and dig into this book, this 12-month, 12-hour-a-day labor of love called Underestimated.
So much to talk about. And before we do, I also wanted to mention, Mary, you've been featured on CNN, MSN, Business Insider, Southern Living, Hallmark, Home and Family. Like, listeners, this lady knows her stuff. Very impressive. And we are just absolutely honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Okay, let's jump right on in. I love this book so much, not just because of the title, Underestimated, the surprisingly simple shift to quit playing small, name the fear, and move forward anyway. Mary, why? Why did you write this? Let's just start right there. Where did this come from?
I was laughing at myself when Angela said this lady knows her stuff, because I was thinking to myself, like, that usually implies like you've been in a lab doing research or something for years. And I guess I've been in this like lab called life, living out the underestimated message, as we, have sort of alluded to and said. The 30-second elevator pitch version of my story is that I grew up in this single wide trailer in very rural West Virginia, born in 1980, so child of the 80s over here, where we were basically all feral cats, up at sunrise, not back until the streetlights came on, if then. And I just want to paint a picture for the listeners. And if you want to get a picture is worth 1,000 words kind of picture, you can go to thebookdirt.com and actually see the cover of my first book, Dirt, where the trailer on the cover is the trailer that I grew up in. My husband, Justin, is a photographer, and he took that photo the first time I took him home to meet my family. And so it is very much the tin can, sort of dilapidated, like these things were not built to last. This is not a nice double wide with a permanent foundation. This was like a giant soda can, basically. And being the feral cats that we were, I have to take a lot of the responsibility for the fact that the trailer didn't stay very built to last, because my neighborhood friends and I would climb up on the sort of lean-to, shack one-room addition that was sort of the upgrade of choice for 1980s single-wide trailers. Use that to hoist ourselves all the way up on the top of the trailer in the rain and use it as the world's most painful slip and slide. And so, unsurprising to anyone, the roof begins to leak. I always say my people are the people who know what drywall ceiling looks like, the soggy, pregnant pause just before it gives way in a downpour of muddy water. And then the roof leaked. So then the floor also began to crumble, this particle board, soggy brown shag carpeting, where you sort of had to know where to hopscotch from my bedroom through the living room to the kitchen so that you didn't go all the way through. And my dad's a logger, so he would bring home muddy boots that would get into the carpet, and we had stray animals who would go inside the house as much as they would go outside. And so that got in the carpet. We had mushrooms growing out of the carpet at one point. And so I say you don't know where the brown shag carpeting ended and the dirt began. But this was a place called home. This was 0 to 18 where I lived before I went off to college. And then I did a year in England, and then fast forward a little more and I end up in Yale for law school, which is quite, on the one hand, it's like we don't usually expect that outcome. But on a very different side of that coin, this is an underdog trope we've become very familiar with. Right? We know this humble beginnings to the Ivy Leagues. We've seen that movie. We've read that book. Humble beginnings, maybe it's sports stardom, whatever it is. Rory Gilmore just won the Masters. Rory Gilmore, that's not his name. Rory McIlroy. I saw a meme that said, I wonder if Rory's full name is Lorelai, and that's why I said that. Rory McIlroy, that's who it is, won the Masters, right? And what do we want to talk about is how he grew up in this little town without a lot of money in North Ireland, and his parents who sacrificed everything. So we love that humble beginnings to greatness story. And my first book, Dirt, and now this third book, Underestimated, is really going back and unpacking, like, who are we because of our stories? How do we try to make up for those stories the rest of our lives? And how do we stop playing small because we think these stories disqualify us? And so that sort of brings us to this moment right here, hanging out with you two.
I love that. Okay, one of the things that I loved about your book is practical steps. We need practical, easy steps to help us change our minds about things. You talk about simple shifts to stop playing small and move from stuck to start. I cannot tell you, especially this time of year, I've talked to so many women who feel stuck in whatever it is. They just can't, if it's around the house, if it's in, emotional life, wherever it is, they feel stuck in some kind of way. Help us just with simple, practical, easy steps. How do we go from being stuck to start?
Yeah. So, I think like a huge part of the work of this book is even just identifying which face of fear is attacking you in the first place. Because fear is very much a shapeshifter. That's what this book is sort of premised on, is that just when you kind of get it under control, coming in the front door is perfectionism. It's going to sneak in the side doors, overthinking or self-sabotage or whatever the case may be. And so for everybody listening at home, every chapter is a different face of fear. And it's premised on this idea that fear is actually a really boring liar when you really break it down. I've been joking that this book is kind of like the flip book, Facebook of like all the different faces of fear. And the quicker I can get you to recognize them, the quicker you can name them, the quicker all of the power that fear has is going to kind of whoosh right out of the room. Like, sort of like Sarah Rice on the This Changes Everything podcast said, like, it's like pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz. He's not so scary when you see that he was just a small man behind the curtain. And I said, yeah, like a snake oil salesman. Fear is trying to sell you this grift that it's safer to hide than it is to show up. And so when we talk about this shift, that kind of shift in the subtitle, we actually have a breakout page in the book that happens after chapter 3, where a lot of the chapter 3 is where the real work of this book begins. If chapters 1 and 2 are sort of, laying out the problem of why we feel like we keep starting over, why we keep blinking at the last minute and dropping the boulder just as we've reached the pinnacle of the mountain, we lose our grip, we lose our way, and the boulder rolls all the way back down the mountain. And then chapter 2 is really just studying sort of the character of fear and what a boring liar he really is. The shift begins with this idea that a big part of the reason we keep overthinking, we keep second guessing, we keep self-sabotaging, so chapter 3 in particular is self-sabotage is a shot glass, is based on this idea of if we think we have the capacity of a shot glass, then every time we get a little bit more than that, we will subconsciously shrink ourselves until we fit back into the tiny containers we believe we belong in. And so if we are going to begin to hold more, if we're going to battle back the lie that some of us have believed our entire lives, that more would one day be our downfall, that more was a betrayal of the people and the places who raised us. If we're going to hold the capacity for more with this trust that we will steward it well, that we will respond to it with wisdom, that we will be the grown up in the room who can be trusted with it, then we have to start. Dr. Allison Cook, I talk about this in the book, was on my podcast, and she said we have to set small but important commitments that we actually keep. They have to matter to us, but they have to be manageable. And as we keep those promises to ourselves, both big and small, we are showing ourselves there is a grown-up in the room who can be trusted. That grown-up is us. And so there's a ton of practical work in this book, but there's a ton of deep heart work as well. It's coming face to face with, why don't we trust ourselves? There's something in our story that said you can't trust anyone, including yourself. And actually, focusing on not just these big swings that we take on a few headline highlight reel days of our lives, but day by day with intentionality. Who are we becoming? And are we becoming a person who can stand in success and not make it about us? Are we becoming a person who can stand in having a lot of eyes on what we're doing and not crumble under the pressure or the criticism or the praise? And so the short version of that very long answer is that we begin to shift things, not necessarily by going for the go big moment. The traditional wisdom is to quit playing small. You must go big. But paradoxically, some of the most important work we will do to quit playing small is by actually starting small.
Oh my gosh.
There's so much to say.
There's so much swirling around in my mind right now. I got to figure out where to start. Okay. I am somebody that, and I think a lot of people can relate to what I'm about to say. I am somebody that I have and people are surprised when I say this, that I can be just riddled with fear. It can be crippling to me. I can feel completely insecure. I'm not equipped to do whatever somebody has given me to do, or I have this creative idea. I am a creative, and I'm always wanting to step out of my comfort zone and do things and try things. I'm not afraid to do that, which is interesting because I am a very fearful person. I don't trust myself as the adult in the room. I have to say to myself often, Fran, you're 55. Why are you still playing small? Why are you still afraid to speak up and use your voice? Or why are you afraid to step out and actually do something? I don't know. There's 1,000 very deeply rooted reasons why that can happen, and I'm daily having to work through them. But one of the things that I think is fascinating for me that I want you to speak into, because you address it in the book, is this whole world that I can live in called procrastination.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anything drives me crazier than being fearful, it's going to be procrastination. I'm like, why in the world can I not overcome that very big wall in front of me, when I know that if I just went back here and started doing some small, simple steps along the way, then I would actually not be procrastinating. I would actually get the thing done. So you write in the book, you say, I always feel horrible when I procrastinate. For those of us that understand that, raise your hand. But you're not talking about feeling bad for procrastinating.
Yeah, that's like one of those, like, we're deep into the book and we're making all sorts of, like, we're friends now because I'm telling you all sorts of things. I always feel horrible when I procrastinate. By that, I don't mean I feel bad for procrastinating, although sometimes that can be true. But sometimes, and I get into this in that chapter, that's chapter 8, procrastination is a double-edged sword. It's talking about how I've actually learned to make friends with what I call the terror. It is this moment when you've put it off and put it off and put it off, and then finally, like crystallizing clarity, shooting through your veins like vampire venom in a wildly popular YA novel, it suddenly all just like snaps into like complete superhero focus, and the words just pour out of you as if they were there all along. And I've really learned how to harness that to the point that it now feels like my best work doesn't show up until there is some sort of real pressure, real stakes or high deadline. I might actually lose the opportunity if I don't get it together. And so kind of to get into that, I want to take one step back, actually, which is into chapter 7, Overthinking is an Orange Safety Cone, where I start talking about something called Bayesian brain theory, which is more commonly called predictive brain theory. And in its most simple form, it is that the idea that your brain is an incredible prediction machine that can predict with great accuracy whether or not you will succeed at a thing before you even try. before you even start it.
Mm.
And it's basing it on all of this, sort of sensory input, track records of success, data of what has come before, what has always been true before. And what it will do is if you are about to start something and you don't have a complete start to finish blueprint right in front of you, like writing a book, for example, or it feels more daunting than the normal size of the projects that you tackle, or it's way outside of your comfort zone compared to how you normally put yourself out there with a lot of eyes on it, your brain will very quickly go, nope.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep.
All of us have experienced the nope
Yeah.
moment, and it will
Yes.
like 90-degree divert you over to these low risk, low effort, quick reward activities we call instant gratification. Right? Let me go do something I've already done, put it on my to-do list and mark it off because it feels good.
Right.
In fact, the feels good part is called immediate mood repair. Your brain is not trying to get you to succeed. It's not trying to get you to hit all your goals. It's trying to get you to survive. And part of that surviving is I want to feel good. I don't want to feel the panic of a saber-toothed tiger chasing me, and I don't want to feel the panic of this paper I need to write. And in our brain's mind, they're kind of one and the same. It can't really distinguish between the two. And so that thing that you were describing of like, I do have these things I want to go do. So like, why do I keep like, kind of knee-jerk reacting at the last minute, kind of juking in football terms away from there? In the opposite direction of where I want to go. There's a scripture that says, why do I continue to do the things I do not want to do and not do the things I most want to do? It's so relatable. And it's also proof that fear is a boring liar because fear's been doing this for thousands of years. And so when we get into the procrastination part, and it's that a deep dive of a chapter, it is called the double-edged sword for a couple of reasons. And I'll just say a couple more things. I know this answer's gotten long, but a couple more quick things. One is that I say, for most of us, what is the thing behind the thing? What is that pain that we're trying to avoid? And for a lot of us, myself included, it's that I'm terrified that no matter what I do, it will never be as good as I want it to be.
Right.
And I might actually have to come face to face with the edge and outer limits of my own talents and abilities. And so we procrastinate so that one side of us can always go, if it works out, just imagine how much better it would have been if I had more time. And if it doesn't, if I am disappointed, I can blame it on these impossible circumstances I was up against this one time, not that I don't actually have what it takes. And so that chapter does, like, we get into like physiological procrastination, active versus passive, adaptive versus non-adaptive, but it ends by saying we break the habit loop that, let me put in the data into the prediction model and see what comes out. We break it by paying attention to how it doesn't feel good to procrastinate. We think it does because we're going to go eat M&Ms and watch Mrs. Maisel. But really, the pain of what we're forfeiting is actually greater if we start to pay attention to it. And so the cool thing about Bayesian brain theory is that it's constantly updating with new inputs. And so we can actually train the machine by doing some of these small but important, hard, and increasingly bigger and harder things to go, look, we are people who can do hard things. We are people who can be uncomfortable, sit in the edginess, and show up anyway. And our brain will go, cool, let me update the model. And so it actually stops doing this amygdala hijack that sends us off to do something easy, quite so knee-jerk, quite so reactionary, and we become stretched in our capacity to try and do hard things simply by starting to do hard things.
Why does it feel as if doing the small thing feels so small? Like, that sounds like such a ridiculous question, but there's something that you're just like, no, I want to go right to the deep end. I want to go all the way. I want to get to the end and kind of bypass all of that. And we know that, like, logically, we know that, but the small just can feel so insignificant. And you're just like, oh, why bother? I'm not going to do that. This doesn't matter. Maybe I'm really not supposed to do this hard thing. And so the small thing can be the hard thing, but it should never be the hard thing. Just the small thing maybe should be my new phrase, is just do the next small thing.
I love that. Put it on a t-shirt. Let's do it. I love it. But I'll say that it's a real thing. And I'm going to actually talk about it by talking about the inverse. In that chapter 7 about overthinking is an orange safety cone, I have a section called the Colossus of Clout. And it's based on the Sandlot movie, The Colossus of Clout. The Colossus of Clout.
Yes.
And what happens with that is we set out to do a thing. And I do this all the time. And then I go, okay, cool. What is the highest version of that thing? What's the best one of those things that's ever been done? What's the best book on fear that's ever been written? What's the best talk from the stage on vulnerability that's ever been given, whatever the case may be? And we can kind of get pulled into there's a very companion section to the Colossus of Clout called the Research Riptide, where we get swept away looking at how other people have done it. And so we look at it and kind of like this, in slow growth, I called it something. What did I call it? This like whole is somehow greater than the sum of its parts, Decepticon of other people's success. It was talking about like Transformers and how they like combine to be like, this gigantic transformer. We take the sum of all the parts of what we see other people doing, we combine it, we give each one of them credit for doing all of the things when none of them did. We give them these perfect track records we assign to them that they did not actually ever do. And then we say to ourselves, if it can't be that, I don't want to do it.
Right.
And we get totally overwhelmed by the colossal size of it, and we just shut down to nothing.
Amen. That's me. Thank you.
Yeah. Chapter 7.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to go back a chapter to chapter 6.
Okay.
Because if chapter 7 is for Fran, I feel like chapter 6 was for me. And I feel like in the lawyer world specifically, I've had this conversation so many times with younger attorneys. I'm at the age where I'm one of the older attorneys, which is weird. But I feel like I've become very maternal with some of these younger lawyers. And imposter syndrome is the name of this chapter. Is imposter syndrome is a thin sheet of ice. And you say on page 84, ironically, high achievers just can't believe we have that much to offer the world. And I see this where these attorneys come out and they are killing it. They're doing amazing. They have these unrealistic expectations on themselves. And I'm sure I did too, of, nobody comes straight out of school and knows how to be perfect at anything, but they are so critical and hard on themselves and just very discouraged. And then through conversation, I hear imposter syndrome. But I'm not really a psychologist. I just play one on TV. So I want you, Mary, to talk to us just a little bit about what imposter syndrome is. I've heard that in different circles, but just talk to us about imposter syndrome and then why it's so real in our brains and what do we do about it?
Yeah. So that phrase was I did not know this till I started doing research for this book, but that phrase, I knew this part, was originally coined by two psychologists named Clance and Imes. But what I didn't know until I dug into it is that they actually originally named it the imposter phenomenon. And I joke in the book that I like that better because syndrome makes me feel like the lone soul patient zero with this like self-doubt virus not seen around these parts since the turn of the century. I have to quarantine in isolation until all of this general malaise subsides. And phenomenon makes it feel like it's something we're all in together, especially those of us who are more prone to high achievers or we're creatives. We have a lot we feel like we are being called to put out into the world. I've been saying this book is for the one who feels like they are being called up to greatness, they are being called up to more, and simultaneously doubt that someone like you will ever get there. And so the remainder of that title of their study is actually the imposter phenomenon among high achieving women. And so that's who they were studying in particular, not just women, but high achieving women. And Dr. Margie Worrell, who's picked up their research and run with it, she's an expert on imposter syndrome and all the ways that we sort of take ourselves out. She says you can actually find solace in the fact that if you feel like an imposter, it means you have not settled into the ranks of mediocrity. Imposter syndrome would not be bothered with you if you were just showing up and watching Netflix on the couch 24 hours a day, whatever the case is. If you are doing work that matters, which is like this premise of chapter 2, that's when this uncreative but very busy guy known as fear is going to show up, only when you're doing work that matters. And so imposter syndrome, when I dig into their research, one of the really interesting things they talk about is what they call magical ritual thinking. That can become a very self-perpetuating loop, a very self-perpetuating cycle. And the magical ritual thinking, I kind of joke, is sort of like, the baseball player who thinks he has to wear the dirty socks through the entire playoffs or they'll lose. For high achieving women, our dirty sock superstition, as it were, is that we have to beat ourselves up and assume that we will fail and use that as the very unhealthy fuel on the fire to drive us. And we run so hard from failing, we stumble into success. And the more that we do it, the more we attribute any success we have to the fact that we were so brutal to ourselves in the first place. And that if we were to ever, God forbid, speak kindly to ourselves or assume that we were actually going to do fine on that test or fine on that outcome, that would in fact be the moment we would fail. And so the more we do it, the more addicted to it we become.
It almost feels humble too, as twisted as that sounds.
No,
just
totally.
to totally downplay and be small.
Yes.
How do we, what advice do you have for the younger person that we're counseling that's in the, or even for us when we're stuck in that train of thought?
Yeah.
What
Well,
would you say?
I'll tell you one thing that I've started doing. I have started saying when somebody says the book is good, I say thank you. And then I stop talking.
Wow.
I don't feel the need to go, oh my gosh, it wasn't, there's all these other people. I don't know. I'm not sure. Ooh, thank you so much. Right?
Period.
That in and of itself is an
Mhm.
act of rebellion in this world.
But like if somebody says, "Oh, your outfit's so cute. Thanks. It was $4 on clearance." Like, why do we do
That's
that?
right.
Although that is kind of
Yes.
a badge of honor.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's just, we're a helpful resource at that point. Yes.
But yeah, you just say we are not good at receiving a compliment or
Yeah.
praise.
Or
Just
to
think-
even be the one to say it ourselves first.
Yes.
Like I'm going to tell you something about this book. I heard a friend of mine who is a man, so that's interesting, named Antonio Neves. He said once, like, we should be able to talk about our own stuff with the same excitement and enthusiasm we would recommend Hamilton to somebody else.
Wow.
Like, or fill in the blank for whatever you love, TV show you love, restaurant you love, whatever. And that is how I feel about this book. I have not once felt guilty or bad or like, oh, this is so cringe for saying like, hey, I really think your people would love this. Like, let me know if you want me to come on your show and talk about it. Or, hey, like, I'd love to send you a copy. Or like, hey, do you want to do an Instagram live together? Like, I'm doing all sorts of ask for help things that make me as an Appalachian Enneagram 4 Wing 3 child of the 80s, someone who's very stoic and does not like asking for help. I actually don't have a problem with it for this book because I know the experience people are about to have when they read it. It's like I've been likening it to like a really amazing TV show I just watched or movie, and I've invited my friends over and I'm going to watch them watching it because I know what they're about to experience. That's how I feel about this book. And I think that in and of itself is an act of rebellion. So I have been posting from, for the last 6 months leading up to this book coming out, like, this book is really good. Like, I can't wait for you to read it. I think you're going to love it, period. And I think that like we can be that example, and now somebody else who sees me doing that, it's like, oh, right, women can talk about their work. They can call it good, and it can be a declarative sentence.
I mean, sister, just keep saying that over and over. If we could just play this piece of everything that you just said on loop over and over every single day. Because I just like, where does it come from? Like, not that we're going to go here, but, you just think, why do women in general feel bad, feel guilty, feel like we can't take up space and be confident and say all the good things about ourselves, or just put a period at the end of a sentence and say, thank you. Like, why? It's so sad to me to think that the younger generation is having to navigate that. I didn't realize I was navigating that. I just woke up one day and thought, where did all that come from?
Right.
It just makes me so sad, angry, frustrated. And so then I feel like I'm going to leave this podcast and go, yes, I am going to do all those things that Mary said. And then something's going to happen and I'm going to shrink back and I'm going to become small again. I'm going to think that I don't have a voice at the table or a presence in the room. And it just feels like this endless cycle.
Well, what I would say to that is that's why the small but important shifts are so important. Like, none of us would think if we went to the gym once that we were ready to run a marathon, right? Or one of those Ironman competitions, Iron Woman competitions, whatever. We become a person who's ready for that level of endurance and to show up and compete at that level because of all of the reps we put in all of the days before. And so it gets more comfortable over time as we've already talked about, actual scientific level. Our brains are actually rewiring the more that we do this. And so we're paying attention to the habit loop. Does that actually feel good? Or does it actually not feel good to put off my dream indefinitely? And so it actually, like, the biology aspect of it works in our favor. The more day by day we set these intentions to become the person who can one day stand in these goals. I talk about that in, I want to say it's the chapter on failure, chapter 11, failure is a bankrupt identity. This difference between goals and intentions. On a goal, you get to celebrate on one day, the day you actually complete the goal and throw the confetti and have that, I call them headline days. This would make the headline of the paper of your life. Intentions, every single day you show up, you wake up and you go, who do I have to be today to one day be the woman who stands in those goals? Every day you do that is a day to celebrate. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to get to the end of my life and have like 10 headline days when I got to be happy and the rest were miserable because I was waiting to arrive somewhere. Like every day I am doing the work that I have to put in so that when I get, I say like, ask yourself this question, assume it all works out. Assume it's all going to happen for you. If you knew that, what would you do today to prepare for it? Right. And so for me,
that's a shift.
Yeah, for me, if like I expect to be able to stand on a stage one day and talk about this book, then let me start practicing that talk now. Let me start writing that talk now. Let me start honing my message, having conversations like this. If I want to be able to go on TV and talk about this book where you get 3.5 minutes, then let me work on getting these answers a little shorter because that's definitely an improvement area. But so how would you prepare if you knew it was all going to work out?
Okay, let me ask you this. Can we go back to this idea of failure for just a minute?
Yeah.
Angela and I have talked about failure so many times here recently. I'm walking through conversations with college students about failure, that they are afraid to fail. There's not enough conversation about failure. I work at an institution where academic excellence and rigor, that's what we're known for. And so there's just this, not just a personal desire, but culturally around you, they are constantly striving, achieving, performing. And so when they make a B, I'm like, you didn't really fail. That's okay. But to them, they failed. So we're seeing just younger and younger, this idea, this like should we embrace failure? How do we have a relationship with failure without thinking it's okay to fail? So talk to us a little bit about your understanding of failure and how we cannot be afraid of it, but we don't want to normalize failure either.
Yeah. Well, let me just start from a place of empathy because I'm still mad about the 1B+ I got in undergrad 20 years later. So I super get it. And there, for those of us, especially for those of us who are using perfectionism as a way of kind of keeping people at arm's length so they don't get close enough to see any of the flaws, for those of us who are using perfect records as a way to kind of run away from the hard parts of our story. We run so hard from failure, we stumble into success, that kind of feeling. A B+ can feel fatal. It can feel like the whole, foundation of the life we were building is crumbling, and it can feel just so much more of a disaster than it really is. Spoiler alert, it all worked out. I got the B+ and it still all worked out. So that's the first thing that I'll say. And then the second thing that I'll say, and I just want to pause here and kind of really like marinate in this for a second, is I am genuinely concerned. I'm genuinely concerned about society and where we're headed with this, and this, paralyzing fear that has taken a grip of people when they can't curate and filter every second of their persona and their public appearance. So I'll just give you a very specific example. My last book I launched in 2022, and then this book is launching in 2025. So it's been a 3-year difference. And just in that 3 years, I have seen a marked, dramatic resistance to people joining me for Instagram Lives. They will have me on their podcasts. They will do giveaways. They will send entire emails to their list. But a 15-minute Instagram Live feels like this big, daunting, scary thing. And I've really just from like a, almost like an anthropology kind of like perspective, like kind of pushed back a little bit. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And it's like, well, it's unfiltered. Like, what if I just say something? It's live. What if I just say something and like, get canceled or what have you? Like, what if I mess up? Like, I might not be able to touch up my appearance the way that I can on a story or on a post. I might not be able to like Photoshop or liquify. And this is a wild time to be alive, when 15 minutes of just being the actual you, unfiltered, unscripted, gosh, who knows what you're going to say, is keeping people from showing up in the world. Like confident, otherwise seemingly confident people, otherwise seemingly successful people who've built huge platforms. It's almost like in an imposter syndrome way, the bigger their success is, the more paralyzed they get that they're going to mess it up. So I just want to like hold that in the air for a second and see if you have anything, or if you've noticed that, maybe especially from the younger generation, like we're becoming
Yes.
terrified of being ourselves without our filters.
Mhm. Yes, 100%. I think it's going to be interesting because we're not far enough out from it to know what this is going to do as they leave the world of their college years and step into a professional world of any kind.
Mm.
I think the angst, I think the frustration and the just the fear that they're going to experience. I'm not going to be able to relate to that because I still don't live that way. As much
Yeah.
as I am present in the world that we live in, the best that I can be, I don't live like that. So I have a really hard time just understanding what that feels like and how you emotionally and mentally have to navigate that. But I just see it on such small levels of um, if we're interviewing students for a particular position and they don't know the questions ahead of time, and just stepping into any kind of space where they have no idea what's going to happen. You just see this person that shut down and
Yep.
just become paralyzed with fear. And I don't know how to help them navigate it, but I think we're learning. You're
Yeah.
helping us learn through the research and the study and everything that's in this book. But it's just still an interesting, scary
Yeah.
to be in.
Yeah, I think like what comes up for me when we kind of bring it back to the full circle moment of the question of like how do we, stop failing at failing, basically, like how do we fail better? It reminds me, this particular side of the prism of this conversation. There's a lot that goes into the chapter on failure, but this particular side of it reminds me of that quote from Anne Lamott, who I love with my whole heart, where she talks about there's going to come a day where you never got around to writing your novel. You're going to have wasted so many days at the beach not splashing in the water because of your soft tummy or your jiggly thighs. And she goes on and describes a few things, and she's like, and it's going to break your heart.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's we can talk about it as a generational thing. I do think it especially is affecting the college students, the high school students right now. I saw a teacher post about like the answers are always at their fingertips. The approval is always at their fingertips on their phones. But when they're in the classroom and they meet the slightest bit of frustration, they just completely shut down because it's not easy. The second it's not, handed to them, it's not easy, then they don't have that resilience built up. And so I think there's a lot there, but I think it's just this idea of there's a very real risk we might spend the rest of our lives perfectly curated and showing up perfect to the world, and never ever once actually get around to doing the things we want to do, we dream of doing, because we're afraid we might be disappointed once, because we're afraid we might have to start over once. When I wanted to write a book, this is not hyperbole, I genuinely thought you sat down in like a couple of days, basically in one sitting, wrote it start to finish as a complete manuscript, sent it to a publisher. They would either say yes or no. And if they said no, your dreams of being an author were over. You had your one shot, Eminem style, you're done.
Yeah.
And I did not realize that in book writing and in life, you actually get drafts and drafts and drafts. And so I saw a meme that said, every day you either win or you're being prepared. And so if you can start to think of the times that you fail as just that you're just learning a better, like, oh, that didn't work, let me go pivot, adjust, move forward and move forward with more information, then it just becomes part of the process. I think it's only final and it's only fatal if you let that one failure, that one setback be the end of the story. And so in that failure chapter, I say, no setback, no story. Like none of us are watching underdog movies where Rudy gets cut from the team once and then he goes, well, I guess I'm done. Right? We had to watch them struggle to get to where they're going. That makes them characters that we want to root for. So yeah, I have a lot of opinions on this, clearly, but it really just boils down to we're just going to become these digital avatars of ourselves if we're not careful. And failure's far more interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap up with I love this. Proving people wrong is a powder keg.
Yeah.
And so how can success and showing your worth blow up in your face?
Yeah. So, I as kind of full circle, I grew up in the trailer. I went to Yale Law. You would think that would be like, okay, I'm good. Like done, arrived. I'll never again question myself moment. But instead, what it turned into was sort of almost like this insatiable hunger for the next sugary sweet hit of a high of getting everything you ever wanted. sort of compare in my first book, Dirt, I compare God to a Pez dispenser. Like keep the candy coming, God. I don't care how anemic my faith has come. I don't care how sick it's actually making me. Just keep the candy coming. And so, I talk about kind of like trying to fill this hole in my heart, this root canal the size of a chest wound with gold stars and brand name labels. And I have spent a good portion of my life using proving other people wrong as the jet fuel that drives me. And in chapter 1 of this book, starting over as a rolling boulder, I talk about how for some of us, other people's doubts, so for all of us, other people's doubts have blurred and bled into our heads and become the singular voice of reason, at once auto-tuned and amplified. It tells us, just don't show up. It'll be safer if you don't. Some of us get frozen right where we are and go, okay, I'll listen. Others of us, on the other hand, though, kind of take other people's underestimation and we wear it like a badge of honor. One of my favorite lines in the whole book is, in a true Jeff Goldblum worthy life finds a way, adapt or find yourself exchange moment of clarity, we take their doubts, petrified doubts, inject them with every ounce of survival wired right into our DNA and hatch an entirely different species of success altogether. In short, we wear their underestimation and we use it like jet fuel, right? We become the keepers of every perceived slight, the sacred patron saints of the underdogs, the uninvited, I call it like the sacred order of the underestimated. And we figured out how to take like the hot piles of rejection rotting in the backyard corners of our mind, like, composting, and actually turn it into jet fuel. And so that works really well. Let's just call it like it is. I have reached great, great success proving other people wrong. But it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It is not sustainable. And so in that chapter 14, Success is a Slippery Slope, I talk about the Imperial Sugar Factory in Georgia that actually exploded in 2008. And it killed a lot of people. It horribly burned and harmed a lot of people. People on the scene said it looked like walking right into hell. And so when it was all sort of, the report came out of what had happened, the CEO said that they had not been doing the proper housekeeping, and sugar dust had collected in the silos and acted like gunpowder. It had become like a powder keg. And I liken that to that thing I was just describing about the gold stars backfilling it, the Pez dispenser, keep the candy coming, to this part in Slow Growth where I say, will I ever matter? You might be surprised if you knew how many times those words have stumbled from my lips. Some days I feel like I'll disappear altogether, dematerialize, 1,000, a million atomized molecules floating on the roaring void. And so that kind of starts to feel like that sugar dust. And if you are not doing the housekeeping to say, am I doing this to prove them wrong? Or am I doing it because I believe it's actually going to help people? Then you will become this hollowed out, burned out shell of yourself, this internal combustion, because you weren't doing the housekeeping. So that's what I'd say about that, is you can do it. It'll work for a while, but I can tell you that you also hit scary levels of burnout.
Oh, that's so good. Mary, how can our listeners connect with you? How can we find you? How can we buy your books? What do we need to know?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually going to tell your people about 2 fun things. One of them is in Slow Growth. I introduced these characters called the Achiever types, and they make an appearance again in Underestimated. There are 5 of them. There's the performer who's always on their toes. They need to show both themselves and everybody else how far they've come. I'm the classic performer. There's the tightrope walker who could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying feats to feel the same amount of good. The masquerader does kind of a razzle-dazzle as they push other people into the spotlight, a tricky sleight of hand as they hide in plain sight. The contortionist is our classic people pleaser. They contort because it is easier than to be criticized. And our illusionist in the distance believes that all the conditions to begin and they themselves must be perfect before they can even start. And so we have taken those 5 achiever types and we've actually turned it into a quiz. If you go to achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, my last name is Marantz. You can take the quiz. It takes like 2 minutes to take it, 10 minutes if you overthink it. The questions are super easy and fun. And then in true Mary form, we go very, very deep with the results. I will tell you how you play small depending on your type and how you get tripped up and how we stop doing that and move forward. So that's achieverquiz.com. And then if you go to namethefear.com, we have all the information about the book up there. And for your listeners, we actually have the entire first chapter up there for free. They can go download it and start reading it today, get a feel for my writing voice, get a feel for my storytelling, my sort of visual plays on words, movie quotes, all that stuff. And then if, depending on when this airs, if they want to go ahead and pre-order, or if we're during launch week, go ahead and order the book, then we actually have you get the first 3 chapters right away to start reading while you wait for it to arrive. But way even better than that, my publisher has given everybody who orders by launch day the entire audiobook. So you're kind of getting 2 books for the price of one. One to highlight and underline, one for me to just whisper sweet nothings in your ear. I read the audiobook as I tell you how to quit playing small and quit letting fear have the upper hand. And so that is at namethefear.com. Pre-orders are a huge help for getting a new book out there for the authors that we believe in, who are doing excellent original work and who their work is good, period. Declarative sentence. And so namethefear.com, you can read all about that. And then I'm at marymarantz.com. Nope, just at Mary Marantz. That's it. On Instagram, come send me a DM and tell me what achiever type you got. I want to know.
I cannot wait to do this. I cannot wait.
Yes.
Mary, I think you are let me just tell you, you are an incredibly gifted human being. Incredibly.
Thank you.
And the fact that the Lord knew that darling little girl in that trailer would grow up and become who you are today, and using those hard years, those hard, difficult years, but you have turned that story into something so beautiful, so encouraging, so inspiring for people with such clarity. And just listening to you after this short time, I feel like, okay, hang on a minute, Fran. Remember, you can do this. You're not stuck. You're not small. And so just thank you. You are a real gift. Your word will change lives, just a real gift. And so we're very, very grateful. And I will send you a DM and tell you, I think I know, but I want to be for sure. So we're just so grateful for you. You just keep pressing on, sister. You are incredible.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And I'm just going to be soaking in those words for the rest of my life, basically. Can you just record that and send it to me?
I'll just text it to you, DM it to you. I will tell you all the things. Angela, anything else you want to say to your fellow attorney friend before we say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you, because it is so rare to hear the things spoken out loud that you have spoken into with this book, especially in the lawyer world full of imposter syndrome. Like it is so refreshing. I feel very seen and understood in a way that I deeply appreciate. And I can only imagine, I cannot wait to put this book in the hands of so many that I'm mentoring. So thank you.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, you'll have to tell me what the lawyers in particular think.
I will. You know, we're a neurotic bunch.
Yes,
we will overthink. That is a guarantee.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Rambling Through Everyday Life with Fran and Angela and our new friend, Mary. Y'all have a great week. We appreciate you so much. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Be sure and follow Mary on Instagram at Mary Marantz, Marantz. Check out her website. It is absolutely phenomenal, y'all. MaryMarantz.com. And of course, order Underestimated. You can pre-order it. It comes out on the 29th, April 29th. Mary, we're so proud of you. Thanks for being on the show. And thanks for listening, you guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.